Welcome to the Check Your Head podcast, the podcast where notable musicians come and share their personal stories and their solutions for mental health and wellness. I'm your host, Mari Fong, a music journalist and life coach for musicians, and today I'm excited to share an interview with a musician who first came out to the music scene in 2012, and by 2013 was listed on Alternative Press's 100 Bands You Need to Know This Year. This goth rocker and tattoo artist is the one and only Davey Suicide, who's dropped a new album in 2020 called Rock Ain't Dead. Next, we'll talk with a mental health expert who's a regular contributor to Psychology Today and often focuses on musicians for his articles since he's a musician himself. This is life coach and clinical psychologist Dr. Michael Friedman, who'll talk about how hardcore humanism can improve your life. But first, let's listen to musician Davey Suicide tell his story. I read that you grew up in a small town in Maryland.
Yeah.
And, we all have our growing pains, and you said that your parents got divorced when you were early on. And things were, you didn't feel like you fit, when you were growing up. What was that? You said you were also really angry. And you didn't understand why, did you?
Well, I understood why. It was, the kids at school had parents that were together. They had families, and they kind of had this like happy thing. And my earliest memories, I never saw my parents in the same house together, and if they were yelling. And then that splintered into, I would live, they had joint custody, so 2 weeks at my dad's, 2 weeks at my mom's, and they would just share me and just pass me back and forth. And I would cry. I'd hate going to my mom's growing up. I never wanted to be there when I was a kid, and then it switched because when I became a teenager, she let me get away with everything, and my dad was disciplining me. So then I just wanted to be at her house. Because I could sneak out, or because they could stay out and sleep at my friend's house. And my dad would put rules on. So that was the rub there. And then they decided that I had to stay at one house because our school districts were too far apart where the bus came. And I didn't want to choose one parent over the other because that's what it was symbolizing to me. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up moving out, and I lived at my ex-girlfriend's house. In high school, I lived on the back porch of her house on this wooden swing. I put pillows on it, and I would sleep on this wooden swing outside. And I got my first car, and I would put my clothes in the trunk. And then in the morning, I would take my clothes out of the trunk, go take a shower, and then go to school. And that's how I finished high school, doing that. And I never looked back. Once I'd moved out when I was 16, I got a job. I had a job when I was 14, but I was working at 16, paying rent while I was in high school, finishing up high school, and then graduating. I mean, that was the next time I saw my parents together, was my high school graduation. And that was just weird because I wouldn't talk to them for months. I was so mad, and then you realize they raised you and they did the best they could, and that was a good turning point. But at the time I was too proud to ask for help, and I didn't know the emotional abuse of my mom until much later. And once I realized really where she came from, I knew why she acted the way she did. Mm-hmm. And our relationship now, it's good sometimes and it's bad sometimes, but there's certain things I know are never going to change with her. There's certain communication patterns she's not good with. Mm-hmm. And then there's certain patience things with me that I just don't give her because I'm like, you're grown up, stop acting this way. But yeah, I mean, I think I didn't know how to identify it because I was in and out of having like a counselor when I was little. They would throw me in a room and they would talk to me and play Chinese chess with me, and I would fall asleep in the counselors and waste my parents' money, them trying to get me therapy and stuff. And and it was to try to make me understand why I was in this situation and why maybe I wasn't everyone else. But I think that's why I ended up resorting to music so much, is because while I felt misunderstood, there was this place I could go where I could let go of this stuff and I could feel a certain way. And it was judgment free. I had headphones on. I was away from things. And then I started to write my own songs. And when I would share them with people in high school, that's when I started to have friends. They would relate to it. They'd be like, whoa, I feel this way too. I'm like, really? We should be friends. And then that grew to, playing, hall shows, and then, playing parties, and then we would play clubs eventually, So like, it was never planned to be that way. It never was like, ooh, I want to be a rock star one day. I just wanted to understand why I felt a certain way, and I wanted to express myself, and music became the vehicle.
I'm glad that you connected with music, because it is a great outlet. And, you were saying those lyrics really touched people. Can you remember some of the lyrics that you wrote at that time?
Until Davey Suicide started, I really started to resonate with people. It seemed like when the cross your heart symbol was created, there was two things that happened with the whole Davey Suicide brand. But when I made the cross your heart, I made it to symbolize second chances. And a lot of people think it's Satanistic and stuff, and that wasn't the intent. But I just realized that if I didn't have second chances in my life, I wouldn't be where I was. And the second thing that happened, and this is sprinkled into the lyrics too of the early Davey Suicide stuff, was I coined the name suicide as a reminder that unless you kill yourself, there's no ceiling for what you're capable of. And I liked the dual meaning because people that would meet me thought I would be a certain way. And they thought because of the way I looked, I had to be acting this way. Mm-hmm. And then they would meet me and they'd be like, whoa, I didn't expect you to be engaging, or I didn't expect you're so disarming because you're intelligent and stuff like that. And also the word suicide has such a negative connotation. Mm-hmm. And I saw it as something empowering. And when I didn't buy into the religion thing, because I felt like it took away people's power within themselves, I'm like, dude, you got yourself here. You did this. You put in the work, and you are the vehicle that brought yourself, not some faith. This is what you're actually doing. Like, you might believe in something, and that's great if whatever you're believing in, but don't take away the power within yourself. And that's the whole meaning of the whole Davey Suicide thing and the brand behind it. So that's really when I started seeing people showing up to shows with like the cross your heart tattoo, and people really kind of engaging with that was when I was like, wow, there's something bigger here. I just thought I was writing songs to feel better and to, express myself. And, but I mean, getting back to like my high school bands and stuff, like it just, the connection there was fun. Mm-hmm. It was finding somewhere where everyone felt like they belonged, and whether that was just the style or whatever, it was just like, it was a culture thing.
Yeah.
And, but messaging wise, I would say it developed a little bit more later on.
Well, I'm glad it's a positive, it's something positive. And, and I read it, you wrote, like you said, unless we kill ourselves, there's no ceiling for what we're capable of. So maybe it's just like really looking inside yourself to see what do you want to do and to go out there and try it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like self-reflection, and it looks like you have a lot of self-reflection.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's just like, why didn't you do this? I didn't feel like it. Or I didn't want to go, or I was scared, or I had this to do. Okay, so you didn't, it's not like you got into a car crash or whatever. Like, everyone's in way more control of themselves than we give ourselves credit for. And that's just, it's an empowering thing. And that's what that's what it alludes to.
You mentioned that suicide does have a negative connotation. for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And, we don't want to lose any more of our musicians to suicide or not being able to ask for help or find the help.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been touched by that or been in a situation where you felt like, things are really too tough right now?
Well, I've had 2 girls that I talked to have hung themselves. And then the girlfriend that I moved here with, she basically drank herself and she passed away 3 years ago.
From alcohol abuse?
Yeah, alcohol and liver failure.
Which is like a slow death.
Yeah.
That happens.
And I wasn't shocked because like when I moved here in 2008, yeah, she drank like crazy. And fast forward 10 years of her abusing herself. It was just sad. And as far as having like dark thoughts, I think, we all go through it. There's some nights where you just can't sleep and you don't feel like your purpose means big enough. You feel like in a world where everyone's doing so much, your message is getting lost in the noise, and it's easy to fall into those patterns, and sometimes like I feel like I'm kind of a dumping pad for other people's problems.
Really?
And I listen to a lot of people and give a lot of people advice, and I feel like sometimes I don't have a place to go. And that's kind of a weird thing because you'd think for all the times that I'm there for other people that someone would be there for me. But I've also like, it's fine.
I'm sorry that you lost your friends. And thank you for sharing that because I know that's not easy to share.
It was crazy.
I'm sure it was. And I can't even imagine how that affected you because oftentimes, even if somebody is going through something, you don't think that they're going to take that turn. Or sometimes it's unexpected. Sometimes it looks like, hey, this person is doing okay. And how did that happen?
Both instances, I talked to them the day before. One of them was moving back from New Zealand. She was breaking up with her husband, or I think a boyfriend or husband. He was a firefighter. Mm-hmm. And she was and I still have the Facebook messages because to this day, I feel like the boyfriend did it and he was a firefighter and I feel like he got away with it because she was so excited to come back to LA and move back.
Oh.
And I even talked to her ex-boyfriend before the guy that she was with. I'm like, dude, this just doesn't feel right. I just talked to Brittany, like, look at these messages, look at the timestamps. Like she even like went from being in a relationship to single. And then she was like, I can't wait to get home. And I'm going to be in LA for like a week. And it was just the weirdest thing. And then the other girl, Raven, she just hung herself in a tree in the backyard and her parents found her.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I talked to her the day before or something.
Yeah.
And it was just the weirdest thing. And she had Davey Suicide shirt as her default picture on Facebook. Super dark. And I've been attached to that one for probably 7-8 years. Maybe 9.
This might be a difficult question, but I'm always curious. I mean, I've been very fortunate that no one close to me has lost their life that way, but I always have, I always feel terrible when I hear about musicians or other people that have gone through that. What are the feelings? Is there any guilt associated with it? Is there any like, gosh, I don't know what is that? I mean, is it just confusion, or I know that of course there's got to be a lot of grief.
I don't know. I mean, I feel sometimes it's responsible. I'm like, man, my name's attached to this, but I know it's not for a different reason. But I always, it seems the people that don't talk about it do it. And
how would you help somebody in that case?
I don't know if you can, and the thing is like, there's a buddy of mine, Mario, that was a tattoo artist, and he threatened the same thing. And like, I remember me and my girlfriend at the time drove around Van Nuys looking for him, and he passed out in his car and stuff. And he did it again because he was like trying to get attention from his ex-girlfriend to like take him back. And I got mad at him, and I was like, dude, you can't do this. Like, this is not cool. Like, you don't cry wolf about stuff like this. And I you know, it kind of severed our friendship for a few years because I was fed up. Like, and I feel bad to be mad at him, but like, I had lost people from this.
Right.
And so like, I was like, oh my God, here we go again, you know? But it's a hard one.
Yeah, I think that's a tough thing, is that sometimes you don't know if people are serious or if they're crying wolf.
Right.
But of course, you always want to take it as serious. And but I know what you mean. I had a friend who did the same thing, and I got really, really angry because you don't want to mess with something like that if you're not, if you don't really mean it, because it gets to people. I mean, it's, if you have any ounce of care for this person, it's really going to get to you. So again, I'm sorry that you went through that, but I'm glad that your moniker is positive.
Yeah.
And you're actually, saying, hey, if you are in trouble, it's one thing to have a bad day, but it's another thing if you're really suffering. And in that case, you would encourage people to...
I think everyone's different. I mean, just... the cliche thing of like saying to go get help is so overstated. I think you need to think about the things that make you happy, the moments that make you feel positive. And it's not even about going to talk to someone. It's about diagnosing the root of why you're sad. Is it because you don't feel accepted? Is it because you don't feel pretty, good enough, successful enough? You're broke. You cheated on someone. Like, you're a bad friend, or like there's a root, or you're fat, or whatever. Like, there's a root of all these things. And you need to have a really good look in the mirror with yourself and figure out what that is. Sometimes people have a bad day, and all of a sudden they take it out on their friends that maybe you're going out. Maybe they're going out and you're not going because you were going to go out with someone else and they stood you up. And now you're going to be a jerk to your other friends who are going out having a good time just because your plans didn't work out. It's just like, really get to the core of why you're feeling this way, because I guarantee there's something that sparked it that led you down this path. And I think people don't give themselves enough credit for self-reflection.
Right. And taking responsibility.
Own it.
Owning it and finding the solution, whatever that solution might be, and being really persistent, because sometimes we try things and they don't work, but there's a lot of solutions out there. It's just kind of having to find the right one for you. And like, you found music and writing as a way of kind of releasing your emotions and maybe even the anger that was going on when you were younger. And that's amazing therapy. There's a song that you have called Paralyze, and the lyrics say, "I'll run and hide, I'll just take another. So just so I am numb inside, I'm ready to be paralyzed." And, when I first read that, I think of all the people, musicians sometimes, that are not self-reflective. They don't want to look inside to see what really is the problem. And instead, they'll grab something else. Drugs, alcohol, sex, shopping. There's so many different things people can reach to try to numb the pain or just not deal with it, right? To distract themselves. Have you ever been in a situation like that or been touched by addiction?
Yeah, well, yeah. I when I first started coming out to California, the girl I was seeing was like heavy into drinking, and then she would do coke to sober, and then Xanax to like kill the anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And I would drink and I would do Xanax with her, and I wouldn't do Coke. I still have never done Coke, which is crazy with the amount of it that I'm always around. But I would come back to Maryland and my legs would shake, you know? And I was just like, oh my gosh, like I need to be away from this, you know? And I've always been really conscious of spacing out when I wanted to indulge because I was so scared of being controlled by something. My grandfather was an alcoholic and he died from it. So and he smoked a lot too. And I've always been scared of addictions for that purpose. But luckily I've been cognizant of it. And when I realized that she had a problem, and then that could spill over into my situation if I kept doing it. So I would stop it. And eventually that was part of the reason why we split. But that song in particular, Paralyzed at least, is about kind of knowing your relationship's over and kind of not wanting to accept it because you're trying to like, well, I used to feel this way about her. We used to work and it used to be great. Like, why isn't it like this anymore? You know? But she's a great person. Why do I feel this way that it's done? Like, and you know, you're trying to salvage something that's unsalvageable. And so sometimes you just want to escape it because you're sad. You're like, man, this is a drag. We had it all at one point and now we're at this point and I don't want to accept it, but I should totally be into this still. And I'm not. So that was tough. It's tough to be in that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I find that, you know, even the end to something, whether it's good or whether it's bad, there's still grief because it's the end of something. And then there's, you know, oftentimes there's confusion and then there's transition. You know, where do I go next? What's next? You know, I kind of see life as different chapters. And sometimes you get a sense when it's ending, or sometimes it ends unexpectedly and you're like, it's really over. But fortunately, I mean, it opens up other chapters in our lives that might even be better. Hopefully,
I've always felt like everything gets better.
Oh, that's a good attitude.
Yeah.
But you worked really hard for everything.
People do not know the hustle of nothing has come easy for this guy. It's all been earned. That's for sure.
Well, you mentioned in one interview, you said there was a song called In My Chest is a Grave. And you could explain what that song meant to you.
I think I was guilty of carrying a lot of weight and resentment from my childhood around, from just things that I've gone through. And when you finally just say, hey, I'm not going to carry this weight anymore, it's such a freeing feeling. And that's why you can kind of hear in the last in the outro, just the vocals, like it's just like caution to the wind. I'm free of this, you know. I'm bearing it all. I'm not looking back. I'm not going to be living with crutches. Like, I'm free. And I love that song. That's probably one of my favorite ones on the first album. But that line, my buddy Tyler said it to me. He said, in my chest is a grave one time. And I was like, that's good. And then that's when I added, I'll bury every thought of you. And then I remember we were at the Generation Fuck Star music video shoot, and he was one of the cops. And I had the first album stuff. And I was like, dude, I want you to hear the song that I took that line from. And he was one of the first people I played it for. He was so stoked. And now he's one of the early investments in a company called Pulp Riot.
Okay.
And they sold Pulp Riot, and he's killing it. So shout out to Tyler.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, all that baggage you said you were carrying, you got to a point where you just let it go.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get to that point? Because people are carrying a lot of baggage about different things. I mean, was that something where you talked it out with somebody and you realized that, maybe your parents weren't so much to blame for how they raised you? Or was it just something that kind of like clicked in your own brain that, you know what, it's time to let this go?
I think it's recognition, You got to understand where this feeling is coming from. And then closure. So it's like go to the people that are the source of where this turbulence is or friction is being caused, and say, hey, this is bothering me here. This is why I want to bury this. And then check it off the list, resolve all the loose ends. I think that's what it was, and you just realize that your past isn't it's a lesson. It's not a death sentence,
Mm-hmm.
But the sooner you realize it, get on with it. We have so much to do. We have so much to accomplish and so much to see and experience,
Mm-hmm.
The whole Kobe Bryant thing, like just nothing is promised. And that guy had everything.
Yeah.
Some freak accident took all of it away from him, his family, and like his whole community. And just like, get going, make it work.
Right. Sort of
Resolve things, have clarity.
I really
It's
like
healing.
that, what you're saying about resolving things,
Mm-hmm.
because it's, we all have relationships or things that we've done in our past that maybe we're not sitting right with for whatever reasons. And to tie up those loose ends and having maybe a simple conversation can really make both people feel better, or maybe even clear up misunderstandings. I'm always curious about how many misunderstandings there are where people might have overheard something that wasn't anything that you said, and they've been carrying that.
The text message generation is filled with that. Misconstrued. Right. Oh, I thought you meant this by that. Well, call me. Don't send me a text or voice memo me.
Or tell me, or
hold the button. Hey, I feel this way because I'm thinking this and this is how I feel. Send.
That's so awesome. Because it's something simple like that, but sometimes we're so scared, right? To voice what's in our minds. But as the other person on the other end, don't you appreciate it when someone has a conversation like with that, with you? I always am in awe of it. And I always feel good when someone comes, from a good place and wants to have a conversation about something.
Yeah, my ex Kelly is so good at communication, and she got me to open up so much. I love that girl for that. And we're such great friends still. And she just has the patience, and she did it with all of her friends. And I'm like, you're so bold and brave, and I respect the crap out of you for it. It's awesome. But it's just sometimes you just need the little helping hand to get to the ledge, get over the ledge. It's a lot of people aren't good at it. It's hard.
Yeah.
And it's easy to get caught up in your own thoughts, but then 99% of your problems are just made up scenarios in your head that aren't even real. It's just it's literally just what you're doing when you have extra time to waste. I think that as humans, we just have to always remember that boundaries are only there because you put them there, and that it's never too late to want to better yourself, better your situation, and just move forward with things, Don't point fingers at things for what's wrong, and if own your mistakes and
say sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. But I think every one of us is in a lot more control. We're all in the driver's seat. And always keep that in mind whenever you're heading to a destination, because chances are if you don't give up, you'll get there.
Next, we have a clinical psychologist who attended both Yale and Brown universities, an author and a regular contributor to Psychology Today, Dr. Michael Friedman. Listen as Dr. Mike shares his tips for mental wellness using his program called Hardcore Humanism. I'm getting back to Davey Suicide. You know, he said one thing in his interview that I thought was really interesting, because just the word suicide has a negative connotation to it. But he said it represented, unless you kill yourself, there's no ceiling for what you're capable of. And I know that your Hardcore Humanism program is all about reaching your potential. So I was wondering if you could tell me some of the ideas and techniques behind the program.
Yeah, and so it's basically it's three core processes. The first one is what we call not so nuts, which really emerges from old school Carl Rogers humanistic psychology of unconditional positive regard. You know, the conveying to the person with whom we're working, whether it's therapy or coaching or a seminar or whatever it is, that, you know, we're accepting you as you are. You know, what we want to do is we want to break that cycle of, you know, judging. You know, one of the things that I find at times frustrating about clinical psychology is that a lot of the programs implicitly or explicitly judge, like it's, you have an unconscious conflict, or you have an irrational thought, or you have a cognitive distortion. I'm not a big fan of those words. I'm not a big fan of those mindsets. Like, I'm the big expert, and, you know, you're you know, this crazy person that I have to like fix. And, you know, I obviously, a lot of people in my field don't practice like that, but I feel like to a certain degree, it's baked into the language. You know, it's almost like baked into the attitude. And the first thing that we really say is that we're not about that. You know, we kind of want to start with creating a space where you get to be you, you know, and let's look at the very specific things that have interfered with being you, whether it was somebody like myself in high school, like giving you a dirty look and making you feel like you didn't belong, which again, I hope I didn't do, family members who judge things, racial stereotypes, you know, gender stereotypes that are more societal, you know, whatever it is, that we kind of take a step back and we say, all right, what are the things that are kind of like the weeds on you that we have to pull away? That's the first thing. The second thing is purpose-driven health, which is the idea that the best way to conceptualize a life, a healthy life, is in the context of purpose. So it's basically saying, who are you and you know, what are you about? And setting up a proactive lifestyle plan where purpose and meaning is something that's very important. But what we do there that's a little bit different than what they do in humanistic therapy is we use very strong behavioral techniques. You know, we do monitoring, and we set up goals, and we set up like a schedule, and we evaluate, like, you try different, you know, experiments and see what works. We feel like that empirical core gives you a lot of power. You know, so in you're going for your purpose, we want you to see what works. But the main part of that is we feel as though when you do things that are difficult in the context of purpose, it makes them not difficult, right? So let me give you two separate examples, right? There's two people who are running for 25 miles, you know, as fast as they can. One person's running in the context of a marathon, right? Everybody who's running a marathon should be having a panic attack. They're sweating, they're dizzy, their heart's racing, they're out of breath. They may go to the bathroom in their pants in front of people, and they should all be having panic attacks, but they're not. They all report that this is the most exhilarating moment of their life. Why? Because it's in the context of a purpose, and they already expected to, and they're exerting themselves, right? Those are the two key aspects of purpose-driven health. If you took the same person and you were running behind them with a gun, you know, or just saying run for no particular reason, they would probably have that panic attack. They would probably be a complete mess because it's the exact same behavior, but one's in the context of purpose and one's not. So what we really do is we really say to people, everything needs to be where you understand why you're doing it so you can get that emotional gain, and you can also get the practical benefits of moving more towards your purpose. And then the third part is what we call heavy fundamentals. And this is what we mentioned before, which is, as long as I've been doing this stuff, and by stuff, I mean clinical psychology, I've been seeing people in different forms for like 25 years. So much of it boils down to the basics. So much of it, like I always say to any of the people I'm working with, like, until you're sleeping well, eating well, exercising, and not using substances, I don't even know who you are. Like we can't even have a conversation. I'm not going to talk to you about your what happened to you when you were 1 year old with your mother, when you're like drinking 17 cups of coffee a day and you're telling me you're anxious. Like one of the biggest mistakes I think that people make is they don't look at those basics when they're evaluating their own emotional well-being, because I think a lot of people in my field have created these very elaborate fantasies and stories around why people feel a certain way that have really entered into public consciousness. But we say it's let's get you doing those basic things. Let's get you sleeping well, eating well, exercising, not using substances. Let's get you like connecting with people in a basic way. Let's find what it is that you like to do. Find what it is that makes you feel like you're achieving. Let's also just get you some basic coping strategies, learning how to like breathe through difficulties, learning how to identify what, is happening for you. These are not complicated processes, but they're difficult processes. This formula for losing weight has been the same since the beginning of time. Eat less and exercise. There's a reason why it's so difficult for everyone, including myself. Like I've lost and gained hundreds of pounds over the course of my life. It's not because I don't understand like the fundamental premise. And there's nothing that I'm going to learn about my mother that's going to change the fact that a donut tastes better than a carrot, and it's like, and it's hard. And I think that when you accept the fact that going towards your purpose and living your life is simple but difficult, then you're in the position now where you're like, yeah, I'm struggling, but it's okay to struggle. One of the things that I've learned from a lot of the musicians is just how difficult it is to be a musician. I think about Scott Ian, from Anthrax, talking to me about, working 3 jobs as a kid just so that he could have studio time. And that's not easy. That's not a glamorous rock star life. Yeah. It's incredibly difficult, and if you don't do it in the context of your purpose, it may break you. But if you do it in the context of your purpose and you realize that it's simple, I got to go make money, but it's not easy because I got to work 3 jobs, but now you're prepared a little bit. And so we feel like those principles, the not so nuts, the purpose-driven health, and the heavy fundamentals, that's where we make it from humanism into hardcore humanism. And the way we use that term, the way that, Ian Mackay and others use punk, it's like, well, there's punk. We're hardcore punk. We're a little bit more intense. We're a little bit more confrontational. We're a little bit more independent, just that little edge. And so we take those humanistic principles, we make it hardcore humanism because we fuse in a lot of those behavioral medicine ideas. And so, our hope is that when you come to us in whatever capacity, you feel as though, all right, I can throw off those expectations, those judgments. I kind of can figure out who I am and I can work towards it. And, if it works out well, it's, hopefully it's a better life.
Yeah, that's exciting. I mean, to me, when you're talking about sleep and getting off substances and all of that, it's hard to have like a balanced life if you're not clean. If you don't have the basic foundation of what you need in order to have a better life, I mean, if any of those things are out of balance, you can have mood disorders that are created by lack of sleep, that are created by substance abuse, and so forth. And you're right, people, I don't know if they consciously think about that, but that's so important.
Yeah, no, one of the things that is very universal in my practice is most people who develop panic disorder have their first panic attack when they're hungover. They're like, I feel off, I feel weird, I don't feel stable, and it freaks them out because they don't know what it is. They've been hungover before, but maybe not like that. Maybe they're drinking and they had some pot or they did some Coke or whatever. And so, one of the things as a perfect example, if you're not starting with those kinds of experiences, it doesn't mean you're not going to ever have a panic attack. No, but it makes it a little bit easier. I really stopped drinking for the first time in my mid-30s only to get in shape to be able to do one of our shows, because I realized that I was going to be like thrashing around. I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it from a cardio perspective. But what all of a sudden happened was I started losing a lot of weight, and I was like, mornings, like I didn't see the mornings on the weekends. Like I just, I wasn't drinking all the time, but I was hitting it pretty hard on the weekends. And I was just like, oh my God, there's like stuff happening. There's people out. And I realized there was this like whole other part of life that I was missing when I was like, dragging myself like to the diner so that I could eat as much greasy food as possible to deal with my hangover. And I find that a lot of people I work with don't recognize that, and getting them to align in that way, and look, and if your purpose in life is to party, it's like, okay, that's different. At least know that. But then we have to do other things for you. But a lot of people, partying is a means to an end. It's just not a particularly effective means to an end. So like I'll get a lot of the people I work with who are like, well, you're going out, and it's like, why are you going out? It's like, I want to meet, my boyfriend or girlfriend. I was like, so like your model is like you pregame at 9 with like 3 drinks, then you're doing shots by 10. Then like at 11, you go to a club and you do more drinks. And then like you like go out and you hook up with a random stranger. And then you decide whether that person is right for, like, is that, I just want to make sure, is that the model of like how, like, is that your best shot at finding like a significant other? And you'd be surprised at how many people like say like, well, I mean, when you put it that way, maybe not, but like, that's kind of people's plan. And it's like, wow, your whole life, your whole social life is designed around something that if you just step back and think about it for a little bit, probably isn't going to work. So when you're coming to my office because you're feeling lonely, and I'm saying, well, there's a lot of people who are awake during light hours that actually might be better for you to connect with. And don't get me wrong, I have nothing against people who do that. I was one of those people myself for many years, but that's also how I know that it doesn't get you the results that you want. So it's not about judging it. It's just about taking a look at it and being like, is this what you want to do? Right. Some people say like, look, I'm young now. I want to party and do whatever. It's like, okay, that's fine. But just make sure that then the next day you're not upset that you don't have a significant other. Right. Be happy that you had these fun experiences, hopefully, Yeah. So it's more about aligning with your purpose.
Well, also, when people are on drugs or alcohol or, whatever it is, oftentimes they're hiding behind that. They're hiding their true selves behind the alcohol, whether it's fear, whether it's just their own personality. I know for myself, I mean, I'm sure you could agree, you want to see the real person. You want to see the person that is just not with 10 shots of whiskey or, high on something. I mean, those people might be entertaining at the moment, but, is that the real personality of the person? Or is it the medication or the drugs or whatever it is?
Well, one of the most interesting things that I found in talking with people, most of the people who I've run into through the interviews who I think Derek from Sum 41 talked about this. I think Jared from Dirty Heads talked about this. He's like, it really didn't start with any kind of hiding. It was basically just like, hey, we're having a great time here, having fun. It's like good. It's like, I am being me. Like I'm being that fun, excited, getting with the flow of things. It's just that all of a sudden, like one day you wake up and you're like, oh, I need a beer to settle out. And it wasn't because, it was just, and then, oh yeah, I need another beer. And then all of a sudden, before you realize it, you're in addiction. And then things start to become different. But a lot of the people, I think this is something that a lot of people make a mistake on. It's like a lot of people wound up, with addiction or abuse issues, not necessarily because they were intentionally hiding, but just because they were having a great time and it got away from them. And then, it wasn't so much they were intentionally hiding, but you don't realize. I know for me, for all the years where I don't think I was ever addicted in the classic sense, but I definitely abused alcohol horribly. And I was just really like out to have fun. It was only like later on when it got brought up to me, it was like, hey, you were kind of out of control last night. And it was like, I didn't mean to be out of control. Like I was having a good time and it got that way. And it's hard, I think, for a lot of people to see what they're doing and look at other people's faces and get feedback. So it just starts running away from you. And not that many people confront people who have drug or alcohol problems, to be honest. I had one friend who basically said something to me about it. And I only stopped by accident, quite frankly. So it's very, very tough for people, but yeah, it interferes with a lot, and pot's got a whole nother set of problems. Like the thing I tell people is the problem with smoking pot is that there's no problem with smoking pot. You just are kind of, you don't develop what I would call emotional muscle, so like being alone, it's like with muscle, you tear and then you build, you tear and you build, you tear and you build. You don't get all of those, like, I'm dealing with loneliness, I'm dealing with emptiness, I'm dealing with anxiety, and I'm building up that emotional muscle to tolerate it because you're high all the time. Then when you're not high and something happens, it's like you're not ready for it. You're not built for it. So you got to smoke more. Initially, it's just like a lot of people are just being chill and cool and hanging out. But then you don't realize a couple of years later, like, oh man, I can't handle anything sober anymore. I can't handle anything straight anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's where it can get really bad.
Right. When your reality has become being on drugs versus actually being without it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mike. You've really given us some great insight and some great solutions, especially during this pandemic and all of the changes that are going around right now in our society, that we need things like that to really help us get through.
Well, thank you for having me on. This has been fantastic. And, best of luck with this awesome podcast.
A big thank you to our featured guests, the incredible Davey Suicide, and our mental health expert, Dr. Michael Friedman. For more information on Davey Suicide, find him on social media and Patreon at Davey Suicide. And to purchase his new album, Rock Ain't Dead, go to DaveySuicideMerch.com. And stay tuned for his new single called I'm Afraid of Americans that drops on October 30th. For more information on Dr. Michael Friedman, visit hardcorehumanism.com or psychologytoday.com. And to close out the show, we'll hear a clip from Davey Suicide's single called Animal. So until next time, be brave, ask for help, and be persistent in finding the mental help that you need.
Again, you treat me like an animal. I can't break the curse. You treat me like an animal. Love it makes her hurt. You're dancing in the ashes, singing love is for the birds. You treat me like an animal. Treat me like an animal.
The Check Your Head podcast is kindly supported by DBSA San Gabriel Valley, Lemon Tree Studios, and Blue Oak Mastering and Podcasting in Los Angeles. Visit our website at checkyourheadpodcast.com, where you'll find free and affordable resources for mental health, and where you can also support us by donating or subscribing to our Patreon page. Thank you so much for liking and following us on Facebook and Instagram at Check Your Head Podcast. And the Check Your Head Podcast is sponsored by a 501c3 nonprofit, so all donations are tax deductible. Thank you so much for listening and for your support.